During the last moments of Game of Thrones, we get to see who Bran appointed to his small council. Even to this day, talking about Bran becoming the king is still hilarious. We only get to see 2 of his Kingsguard though, Lord Commander Brienne of Tarth and Podrick Payne. Even though Brienne was just recently knighted by Jaime, thus becoming the first female knight, she's more than deserving of this prestigious position. Pod, on the other hand, is a little more questionable. He was able to kill one of Joffrey's Kingsguard, Sir Mandon Moore, when he was ordered to kill Tyrion during the Battle at Blackwater. It was a surprise attack, so it's kind of hard to give him any praise. But if he didn't intervene, Tyrion would have had an early death, and no one would suspect Mandon Moore of killing Tyrion with all the chaos surrounding them. But Pod wasn't knighted then. Tyrion doesn't have that kind of power. Only a knight or the king can raise a man to the status of knight. After his time with Tyrion, Pod traveled with Brienne, who also couldn't knight him. So I guess he became a knight and member of the Kingsguard around the same time. I guess the show really wanted to give this character a happy ending. Or didn't have any other skilled fighters that we would recognize. With only 2 being shown in the finale, that leaves 5 vacant spots for us to speculate. The Hound is dead, Grey Worm is out of the picture, and Bronn would never take on this position, since he is now one of the most powerful men in Westeros after he was given Highgarden and named Master of Coin. So I really had to dig through the books to fill this list. The easiest one to select would be Arya Hota.
When you were whole, it would have been a good fight.
But then I looked back on the show and was reminded when he was killed in that stupid scene. This is a character that easily killed another Kingsguard member in the books, but with him scratched off the list, the next easy choice would be Balon Swann. Balon is one of the newer additions to the Kingsguard in the books. He was appointed by Cersei to guard over Joffrey, but it doesn't seem like he's one of her men. So far he seems pretty honorable and very skilled. Both Jaime and Tyrion believe he's deserving of this position, which means a lot. He's skilled with a variety of weapons, including lance, morningstar, but he's most known for his archery. When it comes to fighting with a bow and arrow, very few top Balon. Plus, he's from House Swann, one of the houses in the Stormlands considered marcher lords, renowned for their military prowess. I don't even know if he was one of the Kingsguard in the show, because they all wear those masks that cover their faces, and too minor to even mention their names. You would think the 7 best fighters in the realm would be treated a little better than that. But if he was in the show and somehow survived King's Landing's destruction, Bran would likely pardon him and bring him into his own Kingsguard, similarly to how Robert Baratheon pardoned Barristan's cellmate and allowed him to keep his position. For the 4th spot, I think it would be fun to fill it with Darkstar, aka Gerold Dayne. He's been considered the most dangerous man in Dorne, but how skilled he is will be for us to find out in the next book, because towards the end of the last book, Balon Swann is hunting Darkstar for attacking Myrcella. His character revolves around his cousin Arthur Dayne's legacy haunting him. So I think it would be fulfilling to see Darkstar, who was far from the hero that Arthur Dayne was, have a redemption arc. Currently in the books, House Dayne's legendary ancestral sword Dawn is without a wielder, and that's only because only one deemed worthy can use it. I think Darkstar is just going to take it for himself, whether or not his family thinks he's deserving. Possibly after the weapon that helped Arthur Dayne become the beloved warrior, Darkstar can stop being such an ass and finally make a name for himself without being compared to his cousin, the Sword of the Morning. Another candidate with a famous sword would be Lyn Corbray. He's a fairly minor character, but does have some backstory. Towards the end of Robert's rebellion, in the largest battle that took place, called the Battle of the Trident, the young Lyn made a name for himself. His father fought beside him, but was wounded and dropped the family's Valyrian steel sword named Lady Forlorn. Lyn Corbray picked up his father's sword and led an attack on the Dornishmen. Lyn would be the one to finish off the wounded Lewin Martell, Oberyn's uncle and one of the Mad King's Kingsguard. Joining the Kingsguard would mean leaving behind all lands and titles in order to serve, which also means you cannot marry. Well, lucky for Lyn, he doesn't really have much to lose. He was the younger brother to Lord Corbray, so even though his father gifted him with the ancestral Valyrian steel sword instead of his heir, his older brother has the land and title. Not only that, but House Corbray, even though being an ancient family in the Vale, is known to be fairly poor in comparison to other lords. Plus Lyn is into boys, so marriage has always been out of the question. All of these characteristics led Peter Baelish to secretly have Lyn in his employment. Littlefinger has access to everything Lyn could wish for, so Lyn isn't the most honorable of knights. After everyone presumed the Mountain to be dead, the next strongest man in Westeros became Lyle Crakehall, aka Strong Boar. Well, according to Jaime Lannister. But he then goes on to compare him to the Hound, where he just doesn't match up to his speed and savagery. Cersei believes he's a fool, similar to her deceased husband, Robert Baratheon. But from his short appearances in the books, he seems like a pretty decent knight, who would make for a great addition to the Kingsguard. House Crakehall is a house in the Westerlands known for their abnormal brute strength after all. Some of the greatest Kingsguard members who would go on to become Lord Commander weren't the smartest men. Just look at Sir Duncan the Tall and Sir Barristan Selmy. Both fairly simple men. You don't need to be a genius to guard over someone. I think the last position should be held by a man named Andrik the Unsmiling. Like many others on the list, not a lot is written about Andrik, other than he is considered to be the fiercest fighter of all the Ironborn, which is a pretty big deal since raiding is all they really do. He isn't of high birth, which doesn't really matter when it comes to becoming a knight or one of the Kingsguard. But in the 4th book, Euron Greyjoy raises him to a lord after conquering one of the islands in the Reach. He's described as a giant of a man with arms as thick as trees, with the reputation of never smiling. I'm not really sure if an Ironborn has ever been one of the Kingsguard, since they aren't of Andal descent. The Andals are the ones who brought over the Faith of the Seven and knighthood to Westeros from Essos. That's why the majority of the Northerners don't become knights. Northerners descend from the First Men, and they believe in the old gods. The Ironborn believe in something else entirely. They actually believe they came from beneath the oceans. While anything is possible in this fantasy story, the Ironborn aren't the most educated, and they likely also descend from the First Men. I also recall one of the Ironborn being a knight in the books. Sir Harris Harlaw somehow achieved knighthood, while also being a believer of the Drown God. The Hound was also made an exception when he was brought onto Joffrey's Kingsguard without ever being knighted. He was more than deserving, but didn't believe in it after his brother the Mountain became a knight. Yara in the show is more level-headed and modern as opposed to some of her people, so I think it's entirely possible for an Ironborn to join the ranks of the highly respected Kingsguard. So that's my roster for Bran's protection. I'm sure a lot of you guys have other characters in mind, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. I considered Tormund, but he's not one to follow all these rules. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be back with more next week. Thanks for watching.